podcasting technology of NORML is made possible by Red Aphid Interactive Media. More information at redaphid.com. And distributed by the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws in Washington, D.C. This is your daily audio stash, the growing truth about cannabis. Welcome to the most popular audio podcast regarding marijuana in all of America and all the world, featuring interviews with scientists, politicians, doctors, prohibition policy activists, regular cannabis consumers, musicians, and NORML staff and NORML's board of directors, along with music and comedy no other podcast can offer. You can always find out more about the show at our website, NORMLAudiostash.com. We're ending marijuana prohibition with education, one listener at a time. Welcome back to the Audio Stash today, Tuesday, April 17th. I'm your host, Chris Goldstein. Take a moment to join us at NORML to end marijuana prohibition in America. Just visit NORML.org. We're getting into a great week of NORML Audio Stash programming. Today we'll speak with Tom Angel at Students for Sensible Drug Policy, and everyone can get involved this week to make sure the provision in the Higher Education Act, which is being reapproved by a Senate committee this week in Washington, can be rolled back so that students caught with small amounts of marijuana don't lose their federal financial aid. More on that in just a moment. And we're also getting ready for our special 420 show on Friday. Tomorrow on the program, we'll have Mark Emery. He's joining us from Canada, the Prince of Pot, to talk about his case and, all things cannabis going on up there in Canada. Thursday on the program, we'll have Ed Rosenthal, the legendary publisher and activist from California. Ed will be with Keith Strupp in Las Vegas for a 420 event this Friday. And today, right here on the Audio Stash, we'll speak with Mason Tvert of Safer in Colorado about the arrests happening in Denver. Also, Safer is running a series of campus initiatives along with Students for Sensible Drug Policy and the NORML campus chapters that kicks off this week and next week. It's going to be a great week of interviews, education, and information leading on up to our special 420 show, and High Times and NORML are partnering on 420 to get everyone out there involved with reform. Let's make sure that 420 this year is not just a celebration, but also a call to action for everyone out there to get involved with the legal reform of marijuana laws across the country. You can get involved today. Just visit NORML.org. Let's get to our first interview today and find out how we can all make sure that students won't lose their financial aid for getting caught with small amounts of marijuana. Hundreds of thousands of young Americans have lost the ability to attend college because they've lost their federal financial aid due to a drug conviction. Most of those are for minor marijuana possession. Violent criminals, even sex offenders, do not face these same consequences. But this week, a Senate committee in Washington that includes Democratic presidential candidates is considering the Higher Education Act, where this financial aid provision resides in the U.S. Code. Joining us today to discuss how everyone can get involved to get this provision eliminated and even get the aid back for those who have had it stripped away because of senseless prohibition policies is Tom Angel, the Government and Legislative Affairs Director at Students for Sensible Drug Policy. They can be found online at schoolsnotprisons.com. Tom, welcome to the Audio Stash today.
Thanks very much for the opportunity to talk to your listeners.
Great to speak with you today on this topic, Tom. Students for Sensible Drug Policy is calling for people to get involved with this issue this week in particular. Tell us a little bit about this provision and what we can do about it.
Sure. Well, over about the past decade, since 1998, about 200,000 students have been stripped of their college financial aid simply because they have drug convictions, usually for misdemeanor marijuana possession. And of course, murderers and rapists are still perfectly eligible to receive government loans and grants. So we think that this law is, absolutely unfair, and it's also counterproductive, to the aim of reducing drug abuse. How are you going to reduce drug problems by kicking people out of school? So we're at a pretty exciting point in our campaign right now. We've just heard that the Senate committee that handles education issues is going to be negotiating on this issue this week. So we need, students, citizens, and supporters in a number of key states to make phone calls and send emails to the senators that are on that committee and let them know that this unfair and counterproductive policy needs to be overturned this year. This is the year to take action on it. Far too many students have been denied access to education simply because they have minor drug convictions, and it's time to take action now.
And if this provision were eliminated from the Higher Education Act, would students who already lost their aid be able to get it back?
Indeed, they would be eligible. So those 200,000 students that I'd mentioned previously would be able to come back to school, and students who have drug convictions from now on would no longer be stripped of their aid and forced to drop out.
And does this Senate committee alone have the power to get this resolved?
Well, this committee is reauthorizing the whole Higher Education Act, which is the overarching federal law dealing with college aid and access that includes this drug penalty within it. And so, what they're going to be doing as part of those negotiations is deciding what to do with the drug penalty. And we don't imagine that this issue, out of all the the important higher ed issues that are a part of this bill, is really going to be tinkered with in the bill once it gets to the Senate floor. So we think that now on the committee level is really the most important time for people to act and let those senators who are drafting the Higher Education Act reauthorization know that this penalty needs to be overturned. This is definitely the time for action.
Because this is a committee and not the entire Senate, citizens in states who have a senator on the committee can have a real particular impact this week. So tell us which states those are.
The states that we absolutely need people to take action in are the following: Alaska, Colorado, Connecticut, Georgia, Illinois, Iowa, Kansas, Maryland, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, New Mexico, New York, North Carolina, Ohio, Rhode Island, Tennessee, Utah, Vermont, Washington, and Wyoming. But folks could actually just go online to our website at schoolsnotprisons.com and just click on the banner you'll see about this issue, and you'll be prompted to type in your name and your contact information. And what that'll do is it'll generate an email directly to your senators, whether or not they're on that key committee. And then once that letter is sent, on the next screen, you'll see the list of key states where we really need people to make that extra step of making a phone call. And there will be step-by-step instructions on your screen of exactly how to do that, what number to dial, and there will be a sample script provided for you just to make it as easy as possible for people to take action on this incredibly important issue.
And Tom, there are some very recognizable high-profile politicians on the committee as well.
There are actually 3 members of the Democratic side of this committee are running for president right now, and they are Senators Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, and Chris Dodd. So these are people who are out there in the public, weighing in on important issues all the time, and we really need to encourage them to take action on this issue and expand access to education and to stop letting the war on drugs become a war on education.
And Tom, do you think that these presidential candidates especially can find a real resonating issue in resolving this problem?
I don't know that this is going to be one of the most important issues in the campaign. However, we have had very positive discussions behind the scenes with their staffers who've told us that they support us, and they're definitely on our side. But what we need people to do is to make phone calls to encourage them to make this issue a priority among all the other higher education issues that are included in this bill. So they're with us and they care about it, but we've been told by staff members that constituent communication, phone calls and emails from voters, is really what's going to push this effort over the top and encourage these members of the Senate to make this issue a priority and to take action on it.
And there at SSDP, have you heard from and, interacted with some of the people, some of the American students who've fallen prey to this senseless policy?
Sure, we've heard hundreds of unfortunate stories of students who have been busted with a small amount of drugs on campus, lost their financial aid, and been forced to drop out. And one story that particularly sticks out in my mind is the story of a young lady named Marissa Garcia from California. She was caught with a pipe containing marijuana residue in her car. She pled guilty, paid her ticket, and thought that was going to be it. But when it came time to fill out that financial aid form, she saw that drug question, had to answer yes, and she unfortunately lost her financial aid. She was only able to stay in school after her mom refinanced her house to give her some extra money to pay for books and tuition. And there are, thousands of stories like hers.
So with just a paraphernalia charge out there, someone can lose their college degree opportunity.
It's interesting. That's actually kind of an unclear legal issue that's never been clearly answered. But one of the things about this is that drug conviction question on the financial aid form is so confusing and so daunting that students don't really know how to answer it. Marissa, may have been legally able to answer no and get her financial aid, but she had that drug paraphernalia conviction and answered yes and ended up losing her aid anyway. So it's a situation where, we don't even know how many students see that question on the financial aid form and decide not even to apply because they've had a conviction in the past.
Wow, so it sounds like students really need to be careful on those applications. I know a lot of people are applying this week. Tom, I want to thank you very much for joining us here today to talk about this topic.
Thanks so much, Chris. I appreciate the opportunity to come on and talk about these important issues and to ask people to take action. Now is definitely the time when we need everybody's help, so we appreciate folks checking out schoolsnotprisons.com and clicking on that banner to contact their senators. Thanks so much.
Thank you again, Tom. Tom Angel is the Government and Legislative Director at Students for Sensible Drug Policy. We have links to their website, schoolsnotprisons.com. And to get involved today, link up on our website today at normalaudiostash.com.
Out from the black and into the blue. Oh well. Out from the cold and into view. Oh well. So who's got it bad and who's got it easy? Oh well. Who walks on shells and who does the line? Oh well. If love can be sold, then love can be free. To be, to want, to know. And my love's a cage, lines and goes. Oh well. My American scream, it's as quiet as hell. My American scream, it's as quiet as hell.
That's Lead with My American Scream, found up at podshow.com. You're here with NORML's Daily Audio Stash today, and don't you be a quiet American. This is the week to speak up. Everyone out there knows about 420, so make 420 the day to speak up about marijuana law reform. NORML and High Times are joining together on 420 for a joint campaign to make sure that there is a great level of awareness for marijuana law reform on Friday. You can get involved early. Get involved right now. Join NORML today. Just visit norml.org.
Hey, is it 420 yet? This is Rick Cusick from High Times Magazine, and you're tuned into NORML's Audio Stash.
For the last 2 years, the state of Colorado has been making international news for its support of marijuana law reform. In 2005, voters in Denver passed a municipal ballot initiative, I-100, that decriminalized the possession of up to 1 ounce of cannabis for adults aged 21 and over. That ballot initiative was brought forward by Safer Alternative for Enjoyable Recreation, or SAFER. They can be found online at saferchoice.org. And their initiative was couched in the simple and reasonable concept that marijuana is less dangerous than alcohol. In November 2006, that concept was put forward to the entire state of Colorado in the form of Amendment 44. That effort was spearheaded by the tireless work of SAFER's Mason Tvert. Amendment 44 did not pass, but garnered over 400,000 yes votes across the state. Many of those votes came from traditionally conservative Colorado counties. For more on Amendment 44, please visit the Audio Stash archive and go to our special Election 2006 section. Last week, there was some disturbing news from SAFER in Denver. They found that although the voters supported marijuana decriminalization by an impressive margin of 56%, Denver police are actually arresting more residents of the city on minor possession charges. Joining us today to discuss the situation in Denver and a series of upcoming campus reform events with SAFER is Mason Tvert. Mason, welcome back to the Audio Stash today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
It's great to speak with you again, Mason. You were instrumental in helping pass I-100 in Denver. Tell us about these arrest statistics that you've uncovered there.
Well, we recently pulled the numbers. We contacted the police department to find out what happened, and what we found was pretty horrifying. Apparently, since the people of Denver voted to make marijuana legal and stop arresting adults, they've actually arrested more than ever, which is really quite disturbing. But what we've seen is a increase by about 17% in the number of total possession arrests in the city, and we've also seen increases really across the board with regards to adults using marijuana. What's interesting, though, is that the number of arrests for youth marijuana offenses is not up like it is for adults. It's actually down a little, which just goes to show that they're really not trying to make sure that young people aren't getting marijuana. They're just arresting everyone possible. So we have been really duking it out with the mayor and the police department of late and trying to draw a lot of attention to this, because it's something that really just is like I said, quite disturbing. I mean, when the people vote on something and, you know, it passes and then elected officials are unwilling to enforce it, and they're listening to police and not the people, it's really kind of a sign of a tyranny in some ways.
And Mason, have the police really been coming down on people who recognize their rights under this ordinance? I mean, have the residents of Denver become somewhat more relaxed about marijuana in the city, only to have this outrageous law enforcement response?
That's a great question. I mean, yeah, I should point out, you know, we're talking about the difference between, in 2004, there were about 1,900 arrests for marijuana, for misdemeanor and lower, which is so up to 8 ounces. Our initiative was only up to 1 ounce, but the majority of these cases would be possession of up to 1 ounce. But yeah, that's an interesting theory, the notion that, oh, this passed, so more people are using marijuana, so therefore more people are getting busted. Unfortunately, I don't think it's the case, because what is really going on is our police department is engaged in what's known as broken windows policing, which is a theory that if you focus on all the small crimes and make sure that, you know, graffiti's cleaned up and people aren't, you know, supposedly smoking pot on the street and yada yada, that it's going to make a sense of order and there won't be larger crimes. The only problem here is that the people of Denver don't think marijuana possession should be a crime at all. So what's interesting is arrests have gone up in the city across the board for just about everything. So that's their excuse, is that they've arrested more and more people for everything, and marijuana just happens to be one of those things. But once again, it's directly contradicting the will of the voters, and really it just goes to show the police are going out of their way, because they do not need to be citing anyone. They have the discretion to let adults possessing less than an ounce of marijuana go.
Now, last year, Mason, the statewide initiative, Amendment 44, really came very close to passing and garnered hundreds of thousands of votes. I know a similar initiative is planned up there in Colorado for voters to have the chance to weigh in again. Could this increase in arrests in Denver serve to get more people involved and garner even more support for the statewide effort?
It could very well. I mean, if you really go back and follow the whole story of what's happened here in Colorado, we really ran the state initiative as a direct result of the unwillingness of our officials and police here in Denver to start enforcing that city law. So that really set the scene for a state initiative, and obviously this sets the scene once again for future actions here in Denver and once again around the state. So, it could very well lend to some people who may not care so much about marijuana, maybe being a little upset about the fact that the majority of voters are not being listened to. So, could very well have a positive effect, but once again, obviously, we would just assume rather have no one getting arrested.
Now, Mason, we've been covering the racial disparities of marijuana prohibition enforcement across the country, but the arrest data that you gathered in Denver is particularly striking in this arena, it seems.
Yeah, it is, unfortunately. The real big number that jumps out is, based on these numbers that we just got, is that although black people only make up about 10% of Denver's population, somehow they're also accounting for more than 30% of arrests, which is really quite astonishing and just goes to show that it is definitely having a disparate effect on different minority groups. But there are other organizations that have just come out of the woodworks of late that just happened to start protesting this whole concept of broken windows policing as a result of it being relatively racist. I mean, it does have a disparate effect on people with lower income and minorities and so on. So there's also the chance that maybe some minority groups or groups that work for equal rights and so on, who generally don't care about pot, might jump on board with this because they see it as another form of discrimination and so on.
Now, Governor Richardson of New Mexico recently signed medical marijuana legislation into law, making New Mexico the 12th state now to offer legal access to patients. Has that had any impact on Colorado there to the north?
I mean, to be 100% honest, it hasn't really had a huge effect here in Colorado that I've seen. I know that the people working directly on the medical marijuana issue here have really been kind of trying to bring to the forefront the fact that the New Mexico law provides for state dispensaries, which is something we don't have here in Colorado, which is a big problem. But I think it's a good sign of the times that a potential a current presidential candidate is willing to not only sign a medical marijuana bill into law, but also to demand that it be introduced and passed. Another thing that's going on here, which I don't know if y'all have heard about yet, but is what our response to these arrests going up with regard to our mayor, Mayor John Hickenlooper here in Denver, a pretty popular guy. We really used him as a foil during the Initiative 100 campaign and called him out quite a bit. He's a bar owner. We've been following him around his campaign forums with a chicken suit, calling him Mayor Chickenlooper, and really drawing quite a bit of attention to him that he's not very thrilled about. But it's been quite fun, and it's really getting a lot of people to kind of reconsider, why is he not following the will of the voters?
And for photos of that chicken mascot with the Denver mayor, folks can visit saferchoice.org. Mason, because the safer initiatives are in the terms of the comparison of alcohol and marijuana, the fact that the mayor there is a bar owner, does that really begin to resonate with the people?
Yeah, it's really quite astonishing. I mean, and this is really just a clear sign of how scared our elected officials are to act on their basic instincts. I mean, this is a guy who went to Wesleyan University, one of the biggest, marijuana-using schools in the country, and he was there in the 70s. And, he's a totally progressive, I don't want to say liberal, but, pretty liberal guy. He's, I would say, undoubtedly probably supportive of this if he didn't have a professional or political stake here. But the fact that he's got the police unions and the police force and a political career has really, unfortunately, led to him being unwilling to do this, which is why we're labeling him as a chicken and trying to pressure them to take action on behalf of his citizens.
And you mentioned the police unions there, but, Colorado is also home to a few current members of law enforcement who've become very high profile in their support of marijuana law reform.
Yeah, Bob Broadus down in King County is here, and he had come out and supported the statewide initiative, said he supported that last year. And then obviously Bill Masters is down in Telluride. So they're both, obviously very positive, but while that's great that we have those two sheriffs, there's obviously a whole lot more that are not quite as friendly and cause quite a bit of problems for this issue.
And also, Mason, so folks around the country understand here, many might think of Denver as a small city, but it really is a very large metropolitan area.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of smaller suburban areas around here, much like where I'm from in Phoenix. There's a lot of areas around Phoenix, Glendale, Mesa, Chandler, so on. It's the same thing here around Denver. You've got Aurora, Arvada, Lakewood, all these relatively big areas that are all around Denver, and the whole metro area itself, I think, makes up. It's one of the top. I think it's within the top 20, 30 cities in the country. So it's really a big place, and that's why it was such a big deal when this initiative passed. And it's really been quite astonishing to see some of the press, a lot of the press trying to protect the mayor and being unwilling to report on this because, I mean, when this city passed Initiative 100, it was worldwide news. I mean, it was making headlines in Pravda over in Russia, and somehow the fact that an increase in marijuana arrests has occurred is not newsworthy here. I mean, which is kind of crazy, and just goes to show what we're up against with regards to an establishment and the established media, and they're fawning over popular politicians.
Now, as we get closer to Friday this week, there was a very strange, modern, and insidious tactic employed by Denver police last year. And they took photographs of a pro-marijuana rally, then posted photos of people smoking pot on their website online, and asked for the public to identify them. It wasn't really a successful tactic at all, but is that the kind of thing, are those things still happening?
Yeah, that was during 420 last year, and it should be interesting to see what happens this year. 420 is pretty popular at the University of Colorado Boulder. In fact, the administration over there has started to call me, asking me to try to help stop it. I don't know. I thought it was kind of an odd move to call the marijuana activist to get him to stop the marijuana rally. But, that thing's a mob, and we really couldn't stop it if we wanted to. So all I want to do is, make sure that all the students are safe and they're not facing any charges or anything like that as a result of their activities. And we will be monitoring the situation to make sure that doesn't happen.
Now, Mason, let's talk about everything happening with SAFER this and next week. SAFER is sponsoring alcohol-marijuana equalization initiatives on dozens of college and university campuses in the next 2 weeks. First, tell us how this campus campaign got started and what will be happening with it.
Yeah, SAFER started, as a lot of folks know, with campus referenda, student initiatives at the University of Colorado and Colorado State. And since then, we have also helped students pass measures at Florida State, the University of Texas Austin, the University of Maryland. And now, just recently, we've seen measures begin to get passed George Washington University. There was actually just a measure voted on last night, or Tuesday night in Arkansas. Unfortunately, it failed, but it's just there's a big trend here. There's a lot of colleges and college students beginning to put these measures out there, these what are known as SAFER style measures, which simply ask that the university stop punishing students more for marijuana than for alcohol, because they're really making alcohol use seem like it's more acceptable, which is a bigger problem on college campuses. And we're seeing, about 10, 15 of these schools introduce these things or start working on them. And now the capstone of this whole thing thus far is going to be this 420 next Friday, when we have about 50 universities participating, and it's a lot of NORML chapters and SSDP chapters are going to be spending the entire day handing out literature regarding the SAFER message of marijuana and alcohol, and really just trying to activate students on their campus and possibly get some media attention and just have a big groundswell of thousands of students around the country pushing this thing all at once, and it should be very exciting.
Mason, it really seems like this set of SAFER initiatives is perhaps the farthest reaching single point of student activism in decades.
Yeah, it's been very interesting. Obviously, NORML chapters and SSDP chapters have really, seen that how useful these things can be, and it's just such a common sense message that a lot of them, recognize this as something that's very doable on their campus. I mean, there's really no excuse for penalties being greater for marijuana violations than they are for alcohol violations, and students see that as something that's just, so blatantly hypocritical that they are, encouraged to take action to try to change that, and they feel that they have a very valid and good chance at making that change. So we've been really excited to see a lot of these other organizations jump on board and push these measures, as well as, obviously a lot more students getting involved, wanting to do it where they are.
Now, you mentioned the media in Denver, but every college and university has its own newspaper, television services, and in many cases their own radio stations and podcasts. So how willing have college and university media been to cover the SAFER initiatives and marijuana decriminalization in general?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's another great thing about this is that, our campaigns really are big, what we would like to call social marketing. What we're really trying to do is have a big, massive communications effort here to get people to think about marijuana differently. Whereas it's often been, the argument to fight for marijuana laws being a waste of time and police resources, we want to start getting people to think not about the laws, but about just marijuana itself. I mean, is this drug such a big deal? And it really isn't. It's really not. It's really quite astonishing that elected officials and police and so on make such a big deal out of nothing. It's a drug less harmful than alcohol, less harmful than just about everything when it comes to other drugs. And we are, just drawing attention to this, and campus newspapers are obviously willing to jump on this, and getting this story into campus newspapers is great, because not only are we reaching those students who care about this or like to read about it, but also the ones who never think about this and don't care about it, and, possibly faculty and staff and so on. And, some people would say, well, college students are already on our side. Why do you need to so-called educate them? Well, I mean, if you don't educate college students, they grow up to become assholes. And what we have are a lot of people who probably used to use marijuana or used to support it, but now that they're older or have children, they've been convinced that marijuana is far stronger or far more dangerous somehow or something like that. So we really need to focus on young people and make sure they're growing up learning about this properly, so when they are older and they are voters, they're not going to be assholes.
All right, Mason, 420 is on Friday, and NORML and High Times are partnering to make 420 an Education and Legal Reform Awareness Day. But, do you think it's tough sometimes to get that educational message out on college campuses when folks are more in a celebratory mood on a day like 420?
It is a very difficult event. In my personal opinion, I would rather have 2,000 students show up on a field to not smoke marijuana. I think it'd be hysterical. It'd get tons of news coverage, and it would demonstrate that restraint that we need to demonstrate. As of now, a lot of people think, oh, well, these people just want to smoke pot. And I wish I could say that wasn't the case, that they want to change the laws so they could smoke pot. But unfortunately, a lot of people are only willing to come out if it involves, getting high themselves. And while I honestly, don't have a serious problem personally with that, it does make things very difficult with regard to reform when every year we're giving the news a bunch of fresh footage of, 18-year-old kids in public smoking pot. So it's got its ups and its downs, but what we're trying to do here is transform 420 and make it an educational thing more so than a party. Obviously, the partying will be going on, but if we can capitalize on that partying going on by getting the information out to people, getting them talking about it, getting them to consider, oh, well, hey, this is something we could do on campus or something, and get it in the news, possibly even change the news coverage a little, so instead of it being a full story about people smoking pot in public, maybe it's, half that, but half about, these other students trying to educate people, maybe we'd see some benefits from that.
Righto, Mason. Mason, I really want to thank you for joining us here today on the Audio Stash, and I look forward to speaking with you again very soon.
Hey, thanks a lot.
Mason Tvert is the Director for Safer Alternative for Enjoyable Recreation, or SAFER. They can be found online at saferchoice.org, and we'll have links on our homepage today. Listening to NORML's Daily Audio Stash, the growing truth about cannabis. Make sure you visit our website at normalaudiostash.com. That's NORMLAUDIOSTASH.com for more information about every day's show. I'm your host, Chris Goldstein. Thanks for listening today. See you at 4:20 tomorrow.